All right, here we are, episode 58 of Merriwether's World. I am your host, Dr. Mark Merriwether Vorderbruggen, author of Idiot's Guide Foraging, which is currently backwards, co-creator of the Wazoo Survival Bandana, monthly writer of Charm East, Texas, and general medicine man. Hey, people are already here. Good evening, Sarah. Good evening, Alexandra. Good evening, Kathleen, the hardcore Merriweather stalkers. Hey, check out. So we are in my inner sanctum sanctorum here. This is the bedroom of Mr. and Mrs. Merriweather. Yeah, the things R2 has seen. All right, probably more information than people need to know. Good morning, Sherry. Good morning, Melanie. Good morning, everyone. So, yeah, I'm running off my iPad for whatever reason. The iPad through our Wi-Fi works better than my computer through an Ethernet cable. I don't know what the hell is going on. I thought I'd figured things out. I was way wrong. So be it. So, yeah, I got my adventure cabinet behind me. You can't see the top, but it's covered with all sorts of bushcraft knives and hatchets and sharp pointy things. You know, the sort of things everyone has in their bedroom. Okay, so before we start, the usual housekeeping, I have some great news. The Houston Arboretum has decided, yes, we can start up classes again. So on May 17th, we'll have the first post-pandemic foraging class. So let me see if I can make a comment here. What I'm going to do, okay, if this works right, I'm putting all the links for the evening, yes, on there. So let me put that up there. Okay, so yeah, May 17th, I just put the link there and a bunch of other links that I'm going to talk about quick. But yeah, classes are back up and running. One side note, however, is just to keep things a little less risky, though they seem pretty non-risky at this point. They are limiting it to 14 people instead of the normal 20. So jump in there fast if you want to get a live 4-hour walkabout in the heart of Houston's most gorgeous landscape, and we'll do the classes. Cool. So yeah, May 17th. I'm really excited. And for tonight is doing an introduction into permaculture. And I'll just forking weeds. Yep, uncommon bees. I will mention that since I'm running off my iPad, I only see two comments at a time, and they keep scrolling by really quickly. So I apologize if I don't see you to say hello or if I miss your question. But be assured, when this is all done tonight, I do go back through and answer all the questions that you ask. Okay. It looks like it's still a little stuttery. No, we're okay. Permaculture, food forest permaculture. What this is the lazy person's way of creating food garden using or mimicking the techniques that nature uses. If you were to look out, if you were to look out into the woods, the wild, you'll see all these plants hanging out, growing together. No one's gardening them. No one's watering them. No one's taking some plants out and leaving other plants behind. They are all working together to create a stable, healthy ecosystem. So what permaculture does is mimics that by studying the nature, figuring out how has nature arranged itself, and then creating a similar synthetic ecosystem using just edible plants. As I was saying, recreating a ecosystem using all edible plants. You know, if you remember the saying, nature abhors a vacuum. And so by most gardens, there's a lot of vacuum. going on in gardens. There's places where there's bare soil, or it's all just one monoculture crop, or just rows of individual crops, but it is unnatural. It is not self-sustaining. You got to constantly water it and fertilize it and do all this sort of thing. And every year you're planting, new annuals and new, broccoli and onions and things like that. It's a lot of work. You're pulling out the weeds. It's a lot better if you just create a self-sufficient, self-sustaining ecosystem of edible food and let it run its course. You still have to do a little thing, like occasionally you may have to prune trees, but for the most part, if you've designed it right, it just takes care of itself. So let's talk about the design elements of permaculture. How do you create this? It breaks down, and I printed out a picture here. Can we see it? Well, if you look at an ecosystem, it's basically broken up into 7 types of plants. And since this is all backwards, I'm just going to talk about it. If you think of it as levels, so really high stuff all the way down to stuff under the ground. Permaculture, like I said, breaks it into 7 levels, starting with the overstory trees, the biggest trees, then understory trees, trees that need shade of bigger trees. So overstory is 1. Understory trees is 2. The bush and shrub layer is 3. The herbaceous layer, think of that mainly as weeds or the annuals you would normally plant in your garden. The herbaceous layer, that is 4. Is that 4? Yeah. The root layer, so when we talk about the root layer being, number 5, that is the underground tubers that are part of a healthy ecosystem. So tubers, the underground layer is 5. The surface coat, the ground cover, is level 6. And then vines creeping up whatever is level 7. So for a sustainable ecosystem, plant-based ecosystem, this keeps falling. So, okay, you need to create these layers in your garden to fulfill all the niches of nature. Is it niches or niche or niche? I'm going to call it niches. So you're filling all those spots that nature would normally fill by itself, and it goes, I don't have anything to do here. It's all pretty much filled. Everything's going on. All the organs I would want are good there. So it pretty much just goes, all right, have at it. Now, it's a little more complicated than that. Not so much in the 7 layers. The 7 layers, in theory, are really simple. Big trees, little trees, bushes, weeds, vines, tubers, ground cover. But picking the right plants is the art involved, and also the placement of those right plants. So one of my goals tonight, actually I need this as scratch paper. One of my goals tonight is to try and give you a rough introduction. So the best way to start that is with some books that I highly recommend. If you scroll up, you'll see them. But the one I want to start with, it's called Gaia's Garden by Toby Hemway. Unfortunately, he just passed away recently, but he was a really great garden writer, and I wish it wasn't backwards. But this is a really good introductory basic level guide to creating a permaculture system in whatever size yard you have. From a little tiny patio yard, you can still work the basics into that, all the way up to huge acres and acres and acres of land. But the Gaia's Garden, really, really good book for the basics, which we'll talk about a little bit more here tonight. Not so much of the book, but the basics, so you kind of get an overview and decide if this is really for you or not. So that's one of the first books I recommend. The other, and I hope she's watching tonight, my good friend Ellen Zakos, her book Backyard Foraging. This is great because it shows you all sorts of really pretty plants that have edible parts that you can, when she wrote the book, she wasn't thinking permaculture. She was just thinking pretty plants that people would like having in their, backyard landscaping that also has food on it. Well, that's right there, kind of the premise of permaculture. It's just, once you know the plants and how you arrange them in the way. So Ellen's book, it covers all of North America. So whether you're in Texas or Michigan or Seattle, there's good stuff in here. Good, guides to what trees, what bushes, what understory trees, what vines, what herbaceous, all the different components that you would incorporate into your food forest. So a really great book for guiding you and helping you pick the sort of plants that you would want. Now, if you go to the Amazon link, there is also Bill Mollison. I can never remember exactly how you say his last name, but he is the original creator of permaculture, and his big book that's now out of print, so it's kind of expensive to get a hold of, is like the Bible of permaculture. It goes into observing the land, altering the landscape, all the way down. He doesn't get to the plant part of it until probably 2/3 into it. So I believe it was Carrie who mentioned early observing your land. So let's start there. Looking at your land, if you're really wanting to do this, there's a couple things you need to observe for a while before you even start doing anything. One is, what is the sun doing? What are structures and trees and other stuff around that are casting shade and shadow where I want to build my permaculture garden? Because shade and shadow and full sun and all the plants. So you need to know, throughout the year, what's going to be in sun and what's going to be in shade. Really, 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 really important. So, that's probably the number one thing. Number two thing is, where is the water? So, are there any water features? Is there a pond? Is there a stream? Is there a sprinkler system? What parts of the yard are you planning on putting in a sprinkler system? If you do it right, the permaculture shouldn't really need a sprinkler system except in really super drought type areas, because you've picked the right plants that are appropriate for the water level that they're getting. But even like in my yard, in a heavy rain, where does the water pool? Where does it flow? What dries first? What dries last? Where is the damp soil? Where is the dry soil? Knowing that, again, helps you guide. Some plants love wet feet. Some plants can't handle it. Like a moringa tree, a wonderful, non-native, but wonderful plant for food. But it absolutely must have good drainage and no water pooling around its feet. So in Houston, you have to be careful there. You have to plant it on a little mound or something. So where does the water go? And is there anything you can do to direct it to other places? In permaculture, they talk about building swales, which are just mounds. Like if you have a hill, you have almost like mini terraces where it kind of directs and flows and retains the water. So if the water is coming down a hill and it hits a little bump and has to go over that and down again, it's going to kind of pool in that bump rather than just running down to the base of the hill, running to a stream and running off. So by putting in swales, you can control the loss of water. Now, in Houston, we either have way too much water or not enough water. So instead of building swales in my backyard, some of you saw it yesterday at the donut shop at the end of the world, I built what I call tumps or mounds. So some up about 2 feet tall above the level of the yard. Better drainage are up on the tumps rather than down in the low spots. But understanding where the water on your property goes is another key thing. And the nice thing about that is you can adjust it some by, adding dirt places, removing dirt some places, to kind of direct the water flow. Whereas with the shade, I mean, you really can't do anything about, the direction the sunlight is coming. If you can, talk to me. We will rule the world together. Um, yeah. Anyway, who wants to rule the world? I always okay. We're going to go sideways here for. I always thought it'd be great to take control of the world for a day just to prove I could do it, and then give it back because I really don't want that hassle. But anyway, yeah. So you can't control the sunlight. You probably can't control where your neighbor's house is. So the shade and the sunlight you can't do a whole lot about. But later on with the water you can. Okay. Let's see. Okay, I'm just checking if there's any questions. But yeah, observing the land is the first step. Where is the shade? Where is the sun? Where is the water? Once you know that, you can start designing your overall garden. Usually, since the trees, the overstory trees are the slowest growing and kind of the bones of the system, you want to plant those, want to get those in the ground as quickly as you can after analyzing everything around you, knowing what it is. So a couple of tips for, which trees and where to put them. Here in Houston, pecans are a really good choice because you get food from them. Pecans are good. Again, they're kind of slow growing. Hackberry are fast growing, but they're messy and people don't like them. And 20 years from now, it'll be dead and you got to take it out. But between now and then, it'll produce a lot of food. Mulberry is a personal favorite of mine. Keep in mind, mulberries, they will produce a tremendous amount of berries, which can be really messy. So if you have any sort of white patio furniture or white automobiles in your driveway, or your neighbors have white patio furniture or vehicles, the mulberry bird poop will maybe annoy them. Hey, my brother Paul is here. Hello, brother Paul. Okay, so, but pecans, nut trees, oaks, you can use the acorns, but the big trees you want to put in. Well, you need to, because you know where the sun and the shade is, you want to kind of figure out what else you want to put in there. Where are these oak trees or the overstory trees? Where is their shade going to end up? And, oh, hello, John from Corsicana. When I first moved here and I was creating my garden, I was not thinking, or my backyard landscape, Ravenscar, I was not thinking permaculture. I was thinking beauty, relaxing, nature. Also shade, because the back of our house faces south and we get, the sunlight just beating in through the windows. So right in the smack dab center back, I planted an oak tree, which has become huge and beautiful over the last 15 years or so, but now it's casting shade in a lot of areas. So in most cases, plants, especially a lot of food plants, prefer full sun. So if possible, you want to put the big trees in a place where they will cast the least amount of shade over the rest of the yard. You have no choice but to plant the trees somewhere where they will shade the yard. You want to plant them so they give afternoon shade rather than morning shade. In the morning, the sunlight and the temperatures are less strenuous on plants as opposed to the afternoon shade, or sorry, afternoon sunlight, where at that point here in Houston, it can be 104 degrees and the sun's beating down, as opposed to in the morning where it might only be 90 degrees and the sun beating down. So overstory trees, put them where they cast the least amount of shade you can, get, or minimize that. Okay, so you got those in place. You found a place where they're not going to do anything. Now you want the understory trees. Here in Texas, you have a whole bunch of different trees that can work there. Some really good ones are things like pawpaws, which produce these amazing fruit that tastes like banana custards. Um, there's southern waxleaf myrtle. Oh, bye, Melanie. Um, there's a whole bunch of different understory trees. And like I said, the Backyard Foraging by Alan Zakos is a really good resource for finding those. But you put those in the shade of the bigger ones because that's one of the things. The understory, they are plants that can't, or the understory trees, they need the protective shade from the bigger trees. So you might have to wait a while before you can put them in even. But that's okay. You got time. You're going to be here a while. If you watch my show, you will live a long time. I'm hoping. Seems to be working for me. Okay, so understory, some other good choices. A lot of the smaller fruit trees, like kumquats and elderberry, do okay in shade. Turk's cap, well, Turk's cap is more of a bush one. Um, but there are different smaller trees. Now, granted, citrus usually prefers more sunlight, especially uh, shining down on the oranges to make them sweet, things like that. Yopan holly is a good understory tree, so you can get your caffeine fixed. Um, so there's that. Uh, then you start thinking the bushes, and again with bushes you have a bunch of choices. So someone mentioned like blackberries. Blackberries are a great choice on the thick upright cane. The Turk's cap, the Eleagnus, uh, the purple sage, Texas purple sage. Now that prefers full sun. So if you got an area that's full sun, you put, some bushes there too, and they can cast some shade on some other things if needed. Let's see, what are some other good bushes? Oh, blueberries. There is some Texas-friendly blueberries around, more for East Texas, but they're out there. Chickasaw plums are a nice. They're kind of a small tree, fairly large bush. But Chickasaw plums, not the Mexican wild plums, the really tart stuff. The Chickasaw plums, they produce the fruit in the early to midsummer, and the fruit is really, really, really good, as opposed to most of the wild plums have a really tart flavor. That's good for jelly, jam, wine, and brandy, but not so good just for eating off the tree. Okay, so at this point, you probably have all the areas under the shade filled, under the overstory. With the bushes and so forth, you're creeping out into the sun. Ooh, Vitex, yeah, Vitex is another good one. Big bush, small tree. Nice thing about Vitex is it attracts other pollinators to your yard too. Deborah, not any luck getting blueberries to grow. Blueberries, there's one or two native forms of blueberries way out in East Texas. Um, I know Texas A&M has been breeding blueberries, trying to get some good ones that grow, and they have been successful, but they do require a lot of soil amendment and things like that. Farkleberry. Farkleberry would be a good one. A number of the viburnums, things like that. Rabbit-eye blueberries for the south. That's a good one. Thank you, Dente. So, but you're building this ecosystem. So you got the big trees, you got the understory trees, you got some bushes, both in the shade, in the sun. Now we go to the herb layer. Now this is where I really part ways with traditional permaculture. In the traditional permaculture, they really stick to a lot of them, not all of them. Hey, Claudia! A lot of them, Claudia is my neighbor, so I got to give her a special thumbs up. Hey, I like the new Explorer there. It made me think maybe, you know, well, I know you and your husband want the adventure vehicle, but I was wondering if maybe there's a third reason too. But anyway, I digress. Yeah, so permaculture, they go with food crops, traditional domestic food crops, just planted in amongst the bushes and the trees and so forth. I generally go with wild plants. So my herb layer is a lot of the weeds, everything from goldenrod and cucumber weed and all the different dandelion types, white clover, sweet clover, amaranth, curled dock, all that sort of stuff. The couple of reasons: one, it requires even less effort than the domesticated crops, and so it's a little more resistant to big swings in water and temperature and weather. Also, they all will reseed themselves, and so I don't have to replant, in the spring, or as I harvest one thing and pull it up, other plants are already, filling in with their seeds. So it's even a little more wild-like nature, and that it's really self-sustaining. I guess you could let like some eggplants go to seed and some carrots go to seed and stuff like that with the regular permaculture. Sorry, my nose itches. But with my version, using a lot of the weeds as the herbaceous layer, it's all self-feeding and self-taking care of, and a heck of a lot more durable than a lot of domestic crops. Okay, ground cover. Clover is a really good one for that. The different clovers. The straggler daisy, also known as horse herb, is another good thing. Things that just kind of cover the soil and protect it from the sun and the rain, and not so much protect it from the rain, but slow down the impact of the rain on it. They cool the roots of all the other plants. Indian strawberries, if you're out in East Texas again, the partridge berry, but different ground covers, so there's no exposed soil. Nature hates exposed soil. Probably going to put a weed in there. The weed might be edible, which is a good thing, but you may not want it right there. But the ground covers, like I said, clovers are some of the best. Partridge berry, if you can pull it off, a tea berry, mints are kind of a cross between herbaceous and ground cover. It depends on how thickly they grow. So if it's a really thick mint, it could be considered ground cover. Dollarweed and pony's foot, Carolina geranium, all these are good ground covers that will spread and protect the soil, cool the roots, and just help minimize changes going on in your system, kind of mellowing everything out. Tubers. A couple of really good tubers. Betony. If you dug that up, you might have seen a few weeks ago I posted a picture of some betony. They look like a cross between a white radish and a maggot, but they taste really good. Some other tubers in my yard, I use what's called groundnut. If you go on Foraging Texas, you can see that groundnuts form these chains of potato-like tubers, and then they also put up a vine that I use for the vine layer, but we'll talk about that when we get to the vine layer. But groundnuts, Jerusalem artichokes are another tuber plant. Sweet potatoes, another good one. The growing types. If you just go to Kroger or HEB and get the organic sweet potatoes, stick it half in a cup of water, it will start putting out shoots. You snip off those shoots, you stick them in the dirt in bright sunny areas, and they will spread and grow and be a lovely ground cover vine tuber combination of things. On the sweet potatoes, the leaves and stems are edible. You got to cook them, but they're edible, and they're actually quite good. And then in the fall, you can dig up the sweet potato tubers and use those too. Kiri, you need a ground cover that likes shallow soil and some that is invasive. Even bitterweed isn't growing there. And you said the goats eat your horehound. That's a tough one at your area, because you're like trying to grow things on cement. Oh, purslane, that might work. I think Carolina bristle mallow, Kiri, would be a good choice for you. Yeah. off the top of my head. I'd have to think a little bit more. Ooh, canna, yes, Lee, thank you. Canna lilies make excellent big tubers, very starch filled. You can use them just like potatoes. They also form big above ground stalks and flowers. They kind of look like very small banana trees with very beautiful flowers. So that's another good tuber, but you want the different tubers there because they help break up the soil, especially when you harvest them. But they are part of the ecosystem. Tubers are also one of your best sources of starches and calories. So that's another reason why you want lots of tubers in your soil. So canna, betony, groundnut, Jerusalem artichoke, sweet potatoes, those are all really, really, really good tubers to include into your permaculture thing. And there are some that like shade, some that like wet, some that like dry, some that like sun. Yeah, well, okay. Good question, Kyle. Do I consider wood sorrel and violet tubers? Not really. I don't. They produce a tuber, but it's not quite the traditional. The onions. I'm going to say I would consider that a tuber in the effect of the ecosystem, and it's also edible. Whereas the violet tubers, they're edible, but they're a fairly decent laxative. And not a lot of calories or anything like that. Now, the violets make an excellent ground cover. That'd be an excellent ground cover. Wood sorrel, another excellent ground cover. The wood sorrel tubers are also edible, but I find the top part of the plant is way tastier and worth doing that. Eating, the top and just leaving the tubers behind to grow more wood sorrel. So wood sorrel and violets, great ground cover, especially in shady areas. But as far as the tubers, borderline. They would function as tubers in the ecosystem, but from an edible point of view, a calorie point of view, probably not. Ginger, yes, Cynthia, that'd be a great one to put in there. Also, Julie, wine cup tubers, thank you, yes. Two great choices. I need some water here. Actually, even peanuts would be a possibility. Nut sedge. Chris Hamlin, I've eaten ground, but I never knew what they're called. I only, after seeing my animals dig them up. Oops, it says see more. Can I see more here? I'm just really curious, Chris. They get huge. Yep, you follow the vine. I got them growing in a wet corner of my yard. It's cool that you found them in nature. They're kind of rare in Texas. Well, uncommon. But yeah, if you go to the Foraging Texas website page, scroll down to groundnut, take a look at them. Really, really good calorie sources. Yeah, Brie, another turmeric and ginger. Someone mentioned the ginger. Those are two great root crops. Also, they like full sun. So if you have a really sunny area, they do like loose, organically rich soil, but they get huge and they have all sorts of uses. Calories isn't one of them, but they do form the tuber layer in the permaculture ecosystem that you're trying to build. Groundnuts, we mentioned, they produce up a vine. The vine doesn't really have any edible parts to it. You really want the vine to be feeding the tubers, so just leave the vine alone. Keep in mind the groundnut vines will climb over everything, but then that's what a lot of vines do. Some other vines would be grapes, like the muscadine grapes, the Mustang grapes, passion vine. The muscadine does okay in shade. Mustang likes sun. Passion vine generally likes sun, but can also do shade. Groundnut a little more on the shade side, just because it likes somewhat wet soil, and usually to keep the soil damp, you need to keep it somewhat shaded. Some other vines. There are other vines out there. That you can plant off the top of my head. Not poison ivy. Try and avoid that one. I had to take poison ivy down from my pine tree in the front yard. So yeah, vines are another twisty, climby. They use the big trees and the medium-sized trees for support. If you go out in the woods, you're going to find greenbrier. I got greenbrier growing. I'm probably one of the few people on the planet in suburbia, probably the only person in suburbia that purposely planted greenbrier in their backyard. Dewberries, creepy along the ground. They're kind of vines, they're kind of ground covers. So you might see there are certain things that overlap in this. But the end result, again, is you got the seven niches of a healthy ecosystem filled. And so nature goes, yeah, okay, you got it, dude. Let's go with it. I don't need to do anything here. I mean, she's still going to be poking weeds in wherever she can because that's what she's doing. But for the most part, at that point, if you've picked things for the right shade and the right sun and the right dry and the right wet and the all that, it's just going to go. You may have to do some pruning. Like I said, in hot drought weathers, you might have to bring some water in, sprinkler, or I got my rainwater catchment system, and that pretty much serves me well. But yeah, the picking the right plant guilds. What plants. Starting with the big tree, then what understory trees, what bushes, and what herbaceous layer, and the tuber layer, and all that sort of thing. What ones seem to work best. And that's one of the nice things about using just weeds for the herbaceous layer, in that they'll show up and they'll grow where they grow best. And if they don't like an area, they'll quickly die and some new weeds will show up. I got lots of stuff here. Okay. Trying to think where I was. I easily distracted myself. Actually, that was just me thinking and not moving. So, So, picking the right plants for the right spots. So, if you do want to go with domestic plants for especially the herbaceous layer, maybe the vine layer, like peas, beans, those would be considered to be vines. They're probably not going to reseed themselves each year, so you're going to have to plant them each year. And in the time when they're not there, you want to be ready to have some other vine to take their place right away. But that's why I like just putting in the bones, the big trees, the little trees, the bushes, some of the vines, and then sitting back and seeing what nature brings me, and then identifying what nature has brought me and deciding, do I keep it or do I get rid of it? Which is where my book comes in handy. Okay. Do you think a dogwood would be happy next to a pecan? Yes. Dogwoods are shade loving, and they usually grow in more of the hardwood forests, especially out in East Texas. So yeah, a pecan and a dogwood together would do well. Let's see. Hey, Wade. Oh, Jackie, watching your show is like opening a book. A really great book about my favorite things. Oh, that's sweet, Jackie. Thank you. Wow, poison ivy doesn't grow on your land. That's a good thing. Okay. Let's see, what else? Oh, so we've picked the plants. We've kind of have an idea of shade and sun and wet and all that. Now, there are also certain ways of arranging plants that play into the whole permaculture idea. So one thing, nature doesn't grow things in a straight line. It's all ziggy and zaggy and wandering and so forth. So you're not planting things in a straight line. I saw a great question here, so I'm going to answer that from Gerardo. Are mushrooms easy to grow? Certain edible mushrooms are extremely easy to grow, and I grow them in my backyard. Others require more effort. And some, if they show up, nature decided you need them, but no human has ever successfully cultivated them, like puffballs. Puffballs are a great mushroom, but no human, to my knowledge, has ever figured out how to cultivate them and grow them on demand, including digging up huge patches of soil that have the puffballs growing on them and moving them elsewhere. Something changes and they no longer happen. I'm lucky. I actually have puffballs that have finally started just sprouting up in my yard. So, and they sprout up all over, so it's really good. Other things that grow really well: oyster mushrooms, reishi mushrooms, uh, the turkey tail. I said, did I say lion's mane? Thank you, lion's mane. Things like that. There are a number of places. I really like Fungi Perfecti, where you can buy wooden dowels that are already impregnated with the mycelium of mushrooms that destroy dead wood. So if you have some stumps or just big logs that you've hauled into your backyard, you can drill holes and stick the dowels in there and keep it wet and let it grow. And eventually you will have, lion's mane or turkey tail or the reishi or things like that that are really growing well. Let's see, Jordan, I would love to learn to plant mushrooms in my woods. Yeah, like I said, I really like Paul Stamets' site. It's just fungi.com, but he has all sorts of videos and books and things like that. I should probably talk about that maybe in the coming weeks. It's the mushrooms are either extremely easy to grow or almost impossible to grow, depending on the variety. It's not like oysters. Some people get them right off the bat. Others have never get them. It's like oysters are pretty much easy for anyone to grow. The lion's mane, pretty easy to grow. So there's lots of YouTube videos. There's books. There's a book called Cultivating Mushrooms that goes into the detailed science of it. I got it. I heard it was a really good book. I found it to be way more boring than I was looking for, so I never finished reading it. Very, very minute details, but it's if you want to clone mushrooms using petri dishes and auger and stuff like that. But yeah, mushrooms are really easy to grow. Wow, did I get off track? Yeah, actually, a number of these you can buy kits. It basically looks like a cardboard box filled with sawdust. You pour water on the top. You make some, cuts in the side. You set it in someplace dark and damp, and give it a few weeks, and suddenly you have mushrooms. Works really well. Okay. Like I said, I got way off track, but it was such a good question. Does anyone remember what I was talking about? Oh, yes, I remember. Haha. The arrangements of plants, and a couple of things. So in a garden, in a traditional garden, rows of vegetables and herbs and so forth. One of the reasons it's planted like that is so you can walk through it and easily harvest stuff. It's there within arm's reach. In nature, if you have a big swatch of wild plants all growing together, from where your paths are, you can only reach, I can reach pretty damn far, but even then, if there's something, 5 feet off the trail, it's going to be hard to get to without smashing and stomping on other plants. So one of the things that permaculture has come up with is what they call a keyhole garden. And I got paper, I got a pen here, and I'm just going to draw it. And the keyhole garden be patient here. I guess I could have drawn this out. Okay, so it's basically you have a bunch of shapes like this. So it's a keyhole. So you can walk in here, you can stand here, and then you can reach all around and get these plants. And so the goal is to have a bunch of these keyholes kind of linked together. So in the end, you're basically recreating where is it? Oops. Kind of almost like lung tissue. And then all this. So this area would be planted, and then this is where you walk in and you can reach your stuff. So you end up with all these swoops and divots and things like that to kind of mimic the randomness of nature, but also give you pathways in to get stuff without stomping on the plants. And now what some people do, which is really cool, and I'm just going to... Okay. These circles here, they are tubes where they put the compost in. So they're kitchen scraps and grass cuttings and things like that to help feed the soil. So, you know, somewhere in the Keyhole Garden, they'll have a little compost bin, because most of these keyholes, they're raised up some, not always, or they might start at the level with the yard here, and then get high and maybe be a foot or 2 feet above the yard level, you know, in the back or on this same sort of thing here. So this gives shape, it gives drainage, differences in drainage, but it allows you access to all this wonderful food you're growing. So I'm going to recap now. Yeah, the keyhole is way more interesting than traditional. And you can reach everything, and it's way more attractive, and it just has a pleasing, natural look to it. So with the 8 minutes, like I said, a recap of what's going on, and then if something catches my eye, I will jump in there. Yeah, Richard, I watch it all like too much work to keep up. Yeah, I've been told listening to me is like drinking from a fire hose. It's just information. That's why these videos are available on the Facebook page. If you just scroll down to the videos section, all 7 previous ones are there. All the donut shop stuff, all the things that Mrs. Weather jumping up and down in masks, that's all there. So you can go back and replay and study and try and figure out what the hell was he talking about there. Okay, so recap. Permaculture. Creating a synthetic, self-sustaining ecosystem that mimics natural ecosystems but uses all edible and medicinal plants. So you're basically tricking Mother Nature by filling in all the vacuums that nature abhors, but creating a self-sustaining ecosystem. These ecosystems, if you look at nature, you can break the average ecosystem down into 7 layers, starting with the tallest trees, the overstory trees, then the lower trees, the smaller trees that need the shade of the overstory trees, the understory trees, that's layer 2, then the bush layer, so the perennial big bushy bushes, shrubbery layer. You have the herbaceous layer, that's the small plants, they're bigger than ground cover, not permanent, usually somewhat short-lived. Their lifespan is measured in months rather than years. Below the herbaceous layer, you have the ground cover layer. So the stuff that's just off the ground and just covers and protects the soil, shades the roots, shades out other weeds, and just kind of holds everything together. Then underground, you have the tuber layer. The tuber layer is where a lot of your calories are going to be hidden, because a lot of the tubers are calorie rich. But you have the tuber layer, because remember, you want to use every aspect of the ecosystem, and underground counts as part of your usable ecosystem. So grow those tubers there. And then also coming up out of the ground, you have the vine layer. And that's going to be creeping up the overstory trees and the understory trees or out in the sunny area along the fence or things like that. But the vine layer, that's another important part of the overall ecosystem. So by finding the right trees and understory trees and bushes and herbaceous layer and ground cover layers and tuber layers and vine layers for your specific yard situation of sun and shade and soil and water and all that. I mean, this there's a lot of design that goes into this before you ever take shovel to soil. But you're doing all the mental work first to get everything laid out. And once you got it, laid out, you can start tweaking it some. But you're trying to get this system set up. So once it's running, other than like clearing out dead herbaceous layer, maybe watering it when there's a drought situation, you're good to go. You got food there, especially here in Texas, pretty much all year round. You got different things coming into, the edible and medicinal, drinkable things coming in all year round for different, seasons. You don't have to weed it because the weeds are part of the ecosystem. Now, if it's a non-edible weed, yeah, pull those out. If it's an edible weed, let it grow. It may not be the most attractive, but it's food, and it kind of blends. You'll find that once you get a thick mat of like goldenrod and the wild violet and amaranth and sow thistle and all this, it actually has its own pleasingness to it visually. So, and then how you arrange them, making sure the sun gets the sun, the shade gets the shade. Oh yeah, Ricardo, yeah. Then the wind blocks and berms and swales and all that. Usually in a smaller yard, it's not as big a thing as opposed to if you have like a quarter acre or more that you're trying to do it with. Okay, I need a sip of water here because my voice is going. All right, like I said, I can only see 2 comments at a time. So I'm just scrolling back here if there's anything. Yeah, keyhole raised beds are great for keyhole gardens. Um, but yeah, I know it's a lot of information with all sorts of weird asides and stuff like that. Thank you for coming and watching though, and allowing me to get this information out of my head into your computer device. Um, there's a need for this. There's food security. I tell people if you can get 10% of your food just from your yard, that's actually pretty easy to do once you get this set up. Uh, so, but even 10%, that has a huge impact on your diet and your food security and the amount you spend on, the cost of food. It may tick off, farmers and HEB and Kroger and, the Tyson and places like that. But overall, it's a good thing for you. Plus, you're out there gardening, you're getting the vitamin D, you're bending, you're stretching, you're watching, you're attracting birds, you're attracting butterflies, you're attracting wildlife. Jordan, okay, good question. There are certain plants that are really good at sucking minerals out of the ground, and then you use those as a compost cover. You mentioned comfrey. Comfrey is excellent. Very rich. Comfrey is a great plant to grow. It has medicinal properties, but it makes an excellent mulch and excellent compost because it's so mineral rich. Another really great one is the giant ragweed. Uh, Triffid Ambrosia. Is that the giant one? I think so. Um, it's another one that makes these big long stalks, very good mineral absorber. So before it goes to seed, you cut it down, you chop it up, and you spread it around as like a natural fertilizer for the other plants. Um, yeah, Michigan government bans seeds because they're non-essential. Oof. Okay. Oh, wow. Okay. It is 9 o'clock. Time to go join the family. Thank you all. I will see as many of you as possible tomorrow at the donut shop at the end of the world. It looks like the weather's going to be good, so I'm going to be out backyard doing it again there. Ooh, yeah. Touching the soil garden improves the mood. Yeah, there's all sorts of things like that. Okay. At this point, I gotta go. Love you. See you. If not tomorrow, Friday. If not Friday, some other day. I'll be here. You'll be here. We'll have a great time. Good night, tribe. Bye.